Hello, brick sculptors, and welcome to Brick Sculpt. This is Chris, and today I want to talk about SNOT technique. Now, you might know there's tons of different pieces that are commonly referred to as SNOT pieces for their properties and being able to build not on top, but build sideways. Now, in exploring SNOT technique and looking at the history, the two pieces that you most commonly fall back on were the headlight brick and the bumper piece, because this is kind of where it all started. There were other SNOT pieces, but these were probably the most commonly used and the ones that I think most inspired what you see in modern SNOT pieces. But what if I told you we could put all that aside and build SNOT with much simpler pieces, just using bricks, tiles, and plates? So if we take these pieces, we can do similar SNOT techniques, and some of the applications I think are even better than you would get with traditional modern SNOT pieces. Let me show you what we're talking about. Now, I'm sure everybody at one point in their Lego career has been tempted to do this. And it's pretty widely accepted in the Lego world that this is illegal because it is too tight a fit and it puts stress on the parts, although a lot of people still do it anyway. I don't blame you. I will tell you though, this is not the greatest connection, even if it were legal. This whole bottom row of studs and the row of studs on either side of this are completely useless. So you're very limited in what you can do with this anyway. So personally, I don't think this is the greatest technique to use for SNOT when using plates, but it is a SNOT technique nonetheless. Now you might know that it is legal to do it with tile because tile is ever so slightly thinner. The problem there, though, is there's not a lot of applications you can do with tile. You do have an anti-stud side, but nothing on this side, so it's a little less useful. Now, in order to grasp SNOT technique using very simple pieces, it's important to have a good knowledge of LDU. If you haven't watched my LDU video, I'll post it here as well as at the end. And also what I like to call the Lego cube. This is the Lego cube, and the Lego cube is basically a 2x2 by 2 cube, meaning that this is the same length, width, and height on this cube. The reason this is so important is when you're building in SNOT, you need to be able to change the direction. So you need to be able to have something that fits this way or this way. And this is going to be the simplest shape to do it with. In single width bricks, the problem is you run into half plate distances. So it's harder to work with a non-round number of LDUs. So this would be 40 LDU by 40 LDU by 40 LDU, which are nice round numbers. So with this knowledge, we can take a wall and put a hole in it that's 5 plates by 5 plates, or 40 LDU by 40 LDU. And this cube will fit right in there. And we can also rotate it, and it will also fit right in there. And then if we take it and put some studs on top, you technically have a SNOT technique. The problem is this is not locked in. Now there's plenty of ways you could lock this in by sticking plates on it. The anti-stud side, you can't stick anything to without running into these, but you could get creative and build out from there. There's definitely ways to do it. Let's say we went a little bit bigger with this and made the gap twice as wide. If we're sticking to the cube method, we can build as many of these as we want, and it will still be nice whole numbers that we can put SNOT pieces in. So here we could do this. And on the sides, I just used some of these 2x2s with 2 studs on them, which will hold in the backside nicely. And we can lock that in place. Have anti-stud on one side, studs on the other. Now, I did a very similar video to this a while ago about stud reversal using only, you guessed it, bricks, plates, and tiles. And so if we pull some of those techniques in here, such as this here, we can do a stud reversal and have it the same size as what fits in our wall. So we can have studs on both sides if you want to. This is another technique I particularly like, where they fit together very nicely. And same thing, that will fit right in the wall. And then you can lock it in on either side with a plate or a tile. Pretty cool. Now this is a pretty thick wall, so your applications to this are going to be somewhat limited because we're using the cube method. So let's say we wanted to use a thinner wall, like this one here, just 1 brick wide. Can we still do a SNOT piece in here? Well, I've got the same hole as these other ones that will fit it, but the problem here is we're dealing in a half plate increment, because the width of a brick is the equivalent of 2.5 plates, which is going to be really hard to build with traditional plates and tiles. Now you might know the height of a stud, and when I say stud, I mean just the top portion, is a half plate. So if I take a brick, 3 plates tall, and put a plate on it, to subtract the stud, half a plate, I have 2.5 plates, which is the same width as a brick. So I can do this. It won't be the prettiest on the back side, but it will work on the front. Now this technically doesn't line up. I know you're probably all about to rage in the comments about that, so I should probably mention it. This is technically going to be illegal because of one stupid thing that everyone complains about in Lego, and they have a good reason for complaining, and that is the Lego logo. Yes, the stud is half a plate, but the logo, the little raised Lego logo on the stud, goes beyond half a plate height. So technically this does not line up flush with the front. Now there are some workarounds, such as this here. Well, it still has studs, but use open studs. And many people have made the argument that Lego should switch all the way to open studs, so we don't have those micro LDU discrepancies when building in techniques like this. Now again, the back of this is not very good looking, but depends on the application. If you don't need the back to be seen, you can set a brick right in a wall and have it flush to the front. Very simple pieces, SNOT technique. And then you could, of course, lock this in with a plate. So lots of different ways you can make this work. And you're not necessarily limited in size. As long as you stick to that cube method, you can go as big as you want. And you can make a really big plug and stick it in that wall. You can also make as big as you want of a stud reversal. Now this is one of my favorite stud reversals for big applications. And it uses 2 very interesting pieces. This gray piece and this white piece. These are those 2 pieces. And they fit together really nicely and make like a French cleat to hold these together. And then you could put this in this large wall. And you could completely cover it if you wanted to. Overlapping on the sides. Just like this. Do the same thing on the back side. Now again, this wall is getting pretty thick, so it's going to depend on your application. But you can have a full double-sided SNOT wall with nothing but bricks, plates, and tiles. Pretty cool, huh? But yes, that is a pretty thick wall. Now, if you were making a larger stone wall that's double, this could work. There are applications this would be cool. Or a castle or something. That'd be a great way to make a castle wall and not have to go crazy spending a ton of money on specialty pieces when you can just use basic bricks. Let's look at another technique here. Now, these are all going to use the same cube method, but there's a lot of different ways we can apply this. Let's say that instead of putting a hole in the wall, we put a hole in the ground. So now we can take a plate, upright, put a row of tile on the front, and a brick on the back, which gets us our 5-plate width. Leave a 2-brick width gap, and this will slide very nicely right into there. Now, our complaints with this first design of wall, if it's too thick, you're not going to get any thinner than that for a wall. You could build very large walls very thin with this. So lots of cool applications. And let's say you needed it double-sided, you could just stick 2 separate ones. I've got 1 additional plate here to get that 5 plate distance, and then tile on both sides. But just stick 2 different pieces in there. There's your stud reversal right there. So lots of cool things you can do with this. You can also lock this in. So once this is in, if you don't want to pull out easily, you can simply grab some tile or plate or whatever you want to use and run it along this edge and lock this piece in place. So you can make it fixed in that position. Now, I know what you're probably saying is, well, doesn't this have the same illegality problem that we had at the wall with the Lego logo? And yes, it does. But the same solution can be applied. You just have to boost it up 1 layer higher to put a layer of open studs beneath here. And also, if you're going to build this on a large scale, you wouldn't have to use that many. Just a couple spaced out will give you enough support for the wall. And then we can slide our wall down in here. The nice thing too, having that tile on the front, you can build out from it, texture it, put bricks, ingots, tiles, whatever you want on there. And this will be nice and flush to the front here. Now, one side is going to be off by a half plate or 4 LDU. So you have to kind of pick and choose. Do you want it to be the front or the back? Depending on the application, choose wisely. But I mean, doesn't that look really clean and nice? I would also recommend pay close attention to the height you use, because at a certain point, certain heights are going to be tricky to incorporate a brick stacked next to it. For example, right now I have a 6 high with the tiles. If I leave out this top portion, I can take a 5 high brick post, and that will line up with 6 studs in SNOT fashion. So building in 6s, 8s, 10s works out better because you don't have that half. You have to use even numbers to get a nice round number if you're going to tie it into a brick. Something to keep in mind. If you want to lock the base in on both sides, you can always make the base larger too. So you could run tile over both sides to fix it even better. So there's lots of different ways you can use this method. I'll show you one example here of a cool way I found to use this in a practical application for my city. So if we make a channel like this, we can take these grate pieces, which I've always wanted to incorporate into a fence, but never known a great way to do it without using a ton of SNOT pieces. But you can keep this really thin, thinner than a brick wall, if you use this method. I mean, imagine having a basketball court or a prison, if you made this a couple higher, surrounded by these. That would look really good. There's still definitely a lot of studs to cover up, but what a good looking wall. And super sturdy, especially if you lock these down. Really sturdy in there. We're essentially using the same method you'd use to build brick-built roads, but we're building walls in them to make them taller. Now you might be asking, okay, this is all great, but what about corners? Well, that's a very good question because corners can be an issue. If you stick to the cube method, corners are not as big of a problem as they could be. So I'm going to show you a couple different examples here. The first one, I positioned the walls all the way back. So the wall is in the back and everything filling in the gap is in front. And if I put 2 of these with a 2x2 brick in the corner, they meet up quite nicely where you can take a brick and put it there. And this is actually a really nice half plate 4 LDU difference for this trim, which looks really good. Because that's a nice small gap like you would see on an actual trim piece. Now, it'd be fun to try to build an entire house with this method. I've never done that, and I might explore that in the future because this looks really practical. And you could continue this on other corners too if you use the same thing with these corner posts. You would need to find a way to lock in the top. So using the appropriate measurements or appropriate heights would be good. For example, this wall here, because I have one buried, this is 7 studs, so it's not going to line up well unless I make it one taller or one shorter. But if you're smart with it, this will work. I should also mention this technique is going to work best on Mills plates because you can bury this stuff right into a Mills plate very easily. But you don't have to. You could build the surrounding up around it, but I would recommend building on Mills if you're going to use this technique. Now over here, I did another corner method, and on this one, I pushed everything all the way to the front. Now what's going to happen is the back portions are going to intersect. So I had to put a notch in this one. There's a couple different ways you can do that. I used this as filler. You could leave it empty if you aren't going to see the back. But you can use this, or you can use a 1x1 brick to fill. I'll show you here. So first we'll put this portion in, and then you have that kind of weird L shape there. And that's where this will fit in. Then we can put our corner post right there. And there are ways to make these meet up perfectly at the corner, but I think it looks better if you put a brick in the corner. You could definitely make these meet up in the corner, but I like this method a lot better. I think it's a lot cleaner looking. And then we do have that awkward gap in the back. I'm sure if you wanted to get really, really crazy, you could find a way to make it filled perfectly, but I'm not going to worry that much about this for this video. Here we have a half plate discrepancy, but you know, put some furniture over it. Who cares? The other method you could use would be remove this and just put a 1x1 brick in there like this, and that will meet up nicely and just give you a half plate discrepancy along the edge there. But pretty cool. I like how those corners look, and maybe in the future I'll try to build an entire house or building like this. I think it could be a cool method, and you could get some really cool texture here, again, without breaking the bank on specialty parts. It's a lot cheaper to buy some large plates than to go out and buy dozens and dozens of these so you can stick ingots and tiles and things on a wall. Well, I hope you guys liked this video. I hope you found it informative. If you have any questions, please leave them below in the comments. If you have any similar methods that you like to use and you want to share, please let me know below. I also have a Discord server, which is linked in the description. That is a great place for sharing ideas, so you're welcome to post things on there as well. If you guys like this video, please like and subscribe. I'm going to do more just like this in the future. That's all I got for this time, and we will see you next time.